Hey there, this is Ryan with Peak Endurance Solutions. Just wanted to thank you for purchasing a road running training plan from the Training Peaks Training Plan Library. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using an advanced 16-week 5K training plan. Just know that this video overview is applicable to all of my road running training plans. There are not very many differences between the training plans in terms of the overall layout of the plans and the features that you have access to, whether it's a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level plan. There are a couple of small differences between advanced and intermediate plans and a beginner plan, and I'll be sure to point out what some of those differences are here as I go through this overview video. But just know that this video is applicable regardless of which plan, level, or distance that you purchased. So just to start with giving you an overview, you'll see when you first upload this training plan into your Training Peaks calendar that on day one, or week one, day one, there's going to be this introduction note card. So this is where you're going to want to start first. You will hopefully be beginning with this video link that is right here. And this link will take you to the video that you're watching right now. And then for advanced level plans and intermediate plans, there's going to be a little bit more information here regarding collecting your resting heart rate in the following morning, just so you can know what your resting heart rate is. For beginner plans, you won't see that. But all level plans are going to also include this instruction booklet down here. So after you review this video, getting a high-level overview of the plan, the features, and the contents within, this is where you're going to want to go next, because this will give you a little bit more specific information on some concepts and topics that are important as you navigate your way through the plan. So if you click on this, it should download a PDF document. And when you open it up, it should look something like this. So you'll see there's going to be a title page, and then there's going to be a table of contents giving you an overview of some of the content within this plan. And then I start with just an introduction. And then these next couple sections are going to be important, especially if you're new to Training Peaks. So if you are maybe purchasing an intermediate or advanced level plan and you've used Training Peaks before, this section might not be quite as relevant to you. But if you are brand new to Training Peaks, regardless of the level plan that you purchased, this section is important as it does go over what some of the different pages on Training Peaks are and what the content that you'll see within those pages consists of. And then I also go over what some of the different training sessions you're going to see within your plan are and what they consist of, as well as this color system that Training Peaks uses when you complete workouts or don't complete workouts. This does change fairly frequently. Every now and then they like to update their color coding system that indicates the completeness of training sessions. But at the time of the recording of this video, essentially the way it works is if you complete a workout within a certain percentage of the planned distance or duration, it lights up green. But it can also light up yellow, orange, red, or a gray workout is one that was uploaded and not attached to a planned workout. But if you don't complete the session within a certain percentage, within 20% of the planned distance or duration, is going to light up one of these three colors. So this just gives you an overview of what all those different colors mean if you're brand new to Training Peaks. And then you'll see in the next section, I go over just some of the partners that we work with at Peak Endurance Solutions. So some of these partners, they offer discounts if you're interested in any of their products. Roka, obviously a lot of runners know. They make triathlon related gear as well as sunglasses and some other gear and apparel. And then a couple of other companies that we partner with to make our Peak Endurance Solutions branded apparel, whether it's cycling, running, swimming apparel, things like that. And then the next section after that is going to be goal setting. So this just gives you an overview of some different ways of thinking about setting goals. So for the purpose of this training plan, it might be helpful if you need to set a goal related to the primary race that you bought the plan for. So whether it's a 5K through a marathon, if you need to set a goal or you want to set a goal, this goes over some of the different ways that setting goals can be helpful in your journey. And then I get into some of the more important sections within this instruction booklet. So this section is endurance training overview and terminology. So basically what this section covers is some of the different terms and concepts that I utilize within my training plans. So coaches have different types of language and verbiage and terms that they like to use that might be specific to their coaching style. I, for the purpose of the training plans, tried to use very general and broad terms that most people are familiar with. So when it comes to like prescribing training intensity or describing certain types of sessions, I try to use terms that are, again, very commonplace in the endurance community, whether you're a coach or an athlete. And then also this goes over the type of training zone model that I use to prescribe intensity based on as well. So you'll notice that if you have a beginner training plan, all of your run sessions are prescribed to you based on rating of perceived exertion only. And this is the scale that I use. If you have an intermediate or an advanced plan, your run sessions are going to be prescribed to you based on a percentage of your threshold running pace. But I also include some information as you go that indicates how to utilize rating of perceived exertion as well as heart rate data if you have an intermediate or advanced level plan. If you have a beginner plan, though, this is going to be the primary method of training intensity prescription. So this is the scale that you want to be the most familiar with. For intermediate and advanced level plans, it's going to be helpful to know, obviously, heart rate training zones and run pace training zones. So for training zone prescription, I use just a very common 5-zone training model. There are other different types of models when it comes to training zone prescription. There's 3-zone models all the way up to 8-zone models, depending on what type of metric you're using, be it rating of perceived exertion, heart rate, pace, power. And this just shows you what RPEs, percentage of maximum heart rate, pace, and power corresponds to different zones, and then what those different zones consist of. So this is a helpful chart to become familiar with, especially if you have an intermediate or an advanced level plan, where I do give some information on how to utilize pace, heart rate, and perceived exertion. I do have some power-based plans where run sessions are prescribed based on a percentage of your threshold power only, with power becoming a little bit more common on the run. So this gives you also an overview of what power zones or power ranges correspond to which zones. Power can sometimes also be prescribed based on an 8-zone model, and I do believe in my power-based plans that I utilize an 8-zone model as well. And that just basically further breaks up some of these power ranges into like sub-zones for zone 5 in particular, where zone 5 will have like a few different types of zones. But this is a good chart to become familiar with, regardless of which type of plan you have in general, but especially if you have an intermediate or an advanced plan, where I'm using a variety of these metrics throughout. And then the next couple pages, I go over what the different types of run sessions I'll prescribe to you are. So in general, you're going to see a few different types of run sessions. You'll see easy run sessions, aerobic run sessions, tempo, and interval run sessions. You'll also see some race pace training run or race pace running sessions as well, especially as you get closer to your main race at the end of the plan. But in general, there's these 4 types of run sessions that I will prescribe, as well as, again, race pace sessions as you get closer to your key race. But basically, an easy session is something that is like a zone 1 effort on that 1 to 5 training zone scale. So easy sessions are going to be those that are used for just like recovery purposes or just very easy kind of training volume accumulation. These are a little bit less frequent, but usually there's like 1, maybe 2 easy sessions per week that I'll prescribe. Aerobic sessions are kind of the bulk of your training volume. So aerobic sessions are going to be kind of steady zone 2 efforts, and I go over, what heart rate and pace zones kind of correspond to an aerobic effort in here in a little bit more detail. But aerobic sessions and easy sessions are going to be the most common types of runs that you're going to see in your training plan. These are the ones that are going to you'll accumulate most of your training volume with. And then you'll also see tempo runs and interval runs. So these running sessions are prescribed a little bit less frequently. Usually you'll see 1 or 2 of these types of sessions each week at most. And these are the ones that have a little bit more intense training efforts above zone 2. So think of tempo runs as something that's going to be in like zone 3 and zone 4. So something that can range from being a little bit uncomfortable up to rather uncomfortable, depending on how hard of an intensity you're working at. And then interval sessions are going to be things that are really hard. So think like zone 5 efforts. These are shorter, harder efforts that are going to be rather difficult to complete. And then the next section goes over resistance training. This one goes over primarily just some of the basic benefits of resistance training for endurance athletes. Resistance training is now really easy to prescribe in Training Peaks, more easy than it used to be. As an athlete, it's really easy to follow along to the resistance training sessions that I prescribe each week, which will be at minimum 1 session per week and sometimes twice, depending on the type of plan you have and how long that plan may be and what the distance is you're training for. Resistance training, in my eyes, is a non-negotiable for all endurance athletes, regardless of whether you're a runner, cyclist, swimmer, multi-sport athlete. Resistance training has many benefits beyond just injury prevention. It's also important for just overall health as an athlete and as a human being. But there can also be some performance enhancing benefits to resistance training as well, especially certain types of resistance training. So I give a brief intro regarding resistance training here, and then I link to a write-up that I've done on my website that goes into a lot more detail around the science related to strength training for endurance athletes. So this can be really useful if you want to kind of wrap your head around a little bit more of the science behind strength training and why it is so important for endurance athletes. But as far as following along to the strength training sessions, you'll see here in a second when I go back to the Training Peaks plan or the calendar for the Training Peaks plan, that the resistance training sessions are relatively straightforward to follow along to. And then some of the final sections in this booklet just go over some other topics that are important and relevant to endurance athletes. So things like maximizing recovery. None of these sections are going to go into intense detail on these topics. It's just designed to give you a little bit more information related to some of the major points related to topics like maximizing recovery. If there is something that I think maybe warrants a deeper dive into that specific point on that topic, then I will link to some write-ups that I've done on my website that take a deeper dive into the science of those specific points. So again, maximizing recovery, just basic things like sleep, hydration, nutrition, things of that nature. And then I go over basic sports nutrition. So this is going to be like basic evidence-based guidelines surrounding fueling yourself throughout the day, as well as before, during, and after exercise for recovery. So this section kind of overlaps a little bit with the previous section, maximizing recovery, as this kind of starts by just talking about general healthy eating habits. And then I go over some more specific guidelines around fueling before, during, and after exercise. And then also I go over preparing for race day. So this just goes into a little bit more detail relating to the taper and kind of what to expect once you get to the taper portion of your training plan. And then I give at the very end just ways to get in touch with me or dive into some reading on some topics on my website. I call it my VO2 Max Forum. It's essentially just a blog on my website where I have a write-up on a variety of different topics related to endurance sport. And there's, again, a lot of different topics I've written on over the years since I've been doing this. So if there's something that you're interested in, you can go to this site, you can use the search function and write the topic in that you're interested in, and chances are I've written on it. So this can be a useful resource for you as well. All right, so once you have then spent some time reading through that, you should be ready to go and take on this training plan. So I have given you a rest day on the first day. This is common across all of my training plans. I always give the day, week one, day one, as a day off so that you can review this video and read the instruction booklet. I want you to kind of make sure that you take the time to go through the video and the instruction booklet, because it will really, really help you as you go throughout this training plan in understanding not only some of the details of the training sessions, but also just understanding a little bit more behind like the rationale of why we do things a certain way or why I prescribe things a certain way. So once you are past day one and you move on to day two, you'll see that for an advanced and intermediate plan, there's going to be some testing sessions that you do. For beginner plans, you don't have this. You just kind of go straight into training. But for the purposes of establishing pace zones and heart rate zones or power zones, if you have a power-based plan, we do a run-specific threshold test. So this is basically a 20-minute test where you'll be able to extrapolate and estimate your threshold, whether it be on the run with pace or power, and then we can establish training zones. So the way that I recommend that you set up your training zones is if you go into your settings, you'll see that if you go to set up training zones, there's going to be a variety of different methods that you can choose from to establish training zones. What I would recommend is once you complete this test, again, this is relevant for intermediate and advanced level athletes. If you are a beginner plan athlete, feel free to do some sort of testing if you want to know what your paces are. I just don't put the testing in there because I prescribe everything based on perceived exertion. I tend to find that that is a good way to get started with some athletes as well, just to kind of become familiar with what their own rating of perceived exertion is when they're running at different intensities before moving on to heart rate and pace and power. Perceived exertion can be a really great way of monitoring training intensity. And if you are very familiar with how your body feels during certain efforts, it can become even more powerful once you start to layer on top of it things like pace, power, and heart rate. But for intermediate and advanced plan athletes, there's going to be this test session that you do. I have a lot of information on here on like what the threshold means, kind of why we're establishing it. And at the end, I go over how to set up training zones in your Training Peaks settings. What I recommend, though, is to use this Excel spreadsheet, which if you open this up, is going to take you to a spreadsheet that looks something like this. And you'll notice it's a way for you to keep track of training zones that you establish. So it's really, really easy and straightforward to use. All you do is you plug in your age, let's say you're 35, your resting heart rates. This is why getting your resting heart rate is important. Let's say it's 60. Now, for endurance athletes, sometimes it can be a little bit lower. Let's say 50. Again, resting heart rate doesn't matter so much what it is, just make sure you get an accurate reading of what your resting heart rate is. And then you'll see you automatically have heart rate zones calculated. So these are going to be based on a percentage of your heart rate reserve, which the formulation for that takes into account your maximum heart rate minus your resting heart rate. And so this is just an estimated maximum heart rate. If you know your maximum heart rate and it is vastly different than this, make sure that you override this maximum heart rate number and plug it in. So let's say I know for a fact mine is like 195. You'll see that will then update your training zones. If you have no idea what your max heart rate is, this is an okay way to start, but there's a lot of error and variability in this. It's just an estimate. Typically, as you get older, your maximum heart rate goes down, but some people are different based on sometimes just gender differences between men and women. And then also there can be some differences between ages. So there could be some younger athletes who have lower max heart rates than some athletes that are slightly older than them. So a lot of that just depends on training history and genetics and things of that nature. So this is, again, just a very rough estimate. It gives you a good starting place, but if you know what your maximum heart rate is, definitely plug that number in right here and override the estimate. Now, to establish your running pace zones and your power zones if you use power, that's where you use your results from the test. So basically, in order to convert run pace over into training zone pace ranges, you just have to go to this website and use the calculator to convert your threshold speed to pace and back and forth. It takes a little bit of manual work just because there's some calculating back and forth, but that'll let you establish your run pace zones, and it will give you some pace ranges. And then again, if you have power and you used power, all you got to do here, plug in, let's say it was 250 watts, and then your power zones are calculated. You'll see that if you try and plug in, like let's say it was 7 minutes per mile, it's not going to automatically populate here because there has to be some conversions back and forth that you have to do manually using this website. It's fairly straightforward. So just use this website and then you'll be able to kind of manually do it yourself. And then your functional threshold heart rate. So I'll tell you how to calculate your threshold heart rate as well. Let's say it was like 165. It's not going to do anything, but it's nice to just know where it lands on the training zone continuum. So it is useful to know and track as you do this test and then repeat this test later on in the training plan. Once you have all of your training plan or training zones established, then what you want to do is save this and then go back to Training Peaks and set up your training zones in your settings to match what's in that Excel spreadsheet. That's the easiest way to do it. I find that those training zones, the method of establishing those training zones that I have in that Excel spreadsheet are pretty good for most people. Obviously, there's going to be some slightly different ways of calculating training ranges within training zones, depending on which method you use, but that's like a pretty commonplace method that I use, and it works really well for most people. So when you go to your actual settings, you'll be able to go to your training zones and manually plug in your heart rate training zones on the run, your pace training zones, your power training zones, so on and so forth. And then once you have done that, you are now ready to proceed with the rest of the training plan. So for intermediate and advanced plans, it's really important that you do that and do it correctly. Otherwise, your training intensity is going to look really wonky when you go and try and follow these run sessions. Because as you'll see, they're all prescribed on a percentage of your threshold pace. So when you pull up your run sessions, you'll see that there's going to be a description for some run sessions. Sometimes in the beginning I have longer descriptions just to introduce certain run sessions and what to focus on. But there'll be a description, and then there will be the actual details of the activity. So this one's just 2 mile easy recovery run at a percentage of your threshold pace. This will show up as an actual pace range for you. And that's kind of how most of the run sessions look throughout the plan. If you have a beginner plan, it's going to show up as a rating of perceived exertion only. And that's going to be consistent throughout the remainder of your training plan. And so you'll notice that there are going to be running sessions and the occasional cross-training session. So that's what this will look like when it shows up as cross-training. I prescribe all cross-training sessions on perceived exertion only, so you'll see that this one is going to be prescribed on perceived exertion. These are few and far between. There might be one every couple weeks or maybe one a week at most. These are just a way for you to kind of get off your feet and do something a little bit different. If you like to ride your bike, if you have a bike and you like to ride it, if you know how to swim, you could hike, you could do elliptical, you could do an indoor bike, whatever you want, as long as it's just for the most part not a run. You can do as a cross-training session. And then for strength training, you'll see that there's 1 to 2 strength training sessions each week. And these are going to be relatively straightforward to follow. If you use your Training Peaks app, these are actually really straightforward to follow. You'll kind of like move through each of these exercises one by one. And there's going to be videos in here that demonstrate how to do certain exercises. I have video demonstrations for almost every single exercise outside of the occasional warm-up exercise. These were ones that maybe I just couldn't find like a very good video for in the Training Peaks video library or on YouTube. Most of these are relatively straightforward though, but if you do need to know what some of these are, like especially some of these warm-up exercises, just look them up on YouTube and usually you can find a video that is good enough that will describe what this is, or just like plug it into Google and do a Google search and it will usually show you some images of how to do it. But most of these are relatively straightforward warm-up exercises. For actual resistance training exercises, they're all going to have videos of some sort, whether it's from the Training Peaks library of videos or a YouTube video that I've uploaded separately. But you'll get to kind of follow through the workout and enter in weight that you used, if there's any weight that was required to do the exercise. And then when you do the strength training sessions again in the future, you'll have a record of like what weight you used, how many reps you did, and things like that. So it becomes a lot easier to kind of naturally progress your strength training as you go. So really easy to follow now in Training Peaks. And then the other thing that you're going to notice is for all of your training sessions, they're going to be labeled in the title as an A, B, or C session. This is one of the ways that I have introduced some level of kind of flexibility, customization into the training plan so that you can kind of further customize and individualize this plan to your needs. The best way to think about the A, B, and C structure is not necessarily how important a session is, but if you needed to modify or remove sessions altogether because of travel, illness, obligations, things like that, the A, B, and C structure provides a way for you to kind of approach modifying or removing sessions. So for example, if you're looking at, let's say we're in week 5, and for example, that you need to get rid of 1 or 2 sessions because you just need to have a day where you're not doing anything. Maybe there's some family obligations, you're doing something with friends, you have something with work that you just need to have a day off. The C sessions are the ones to get rid of first. It doesn't mean that they're not important. It just means that those are the ones that are going to have the least impact on your overall preparedness for your race and ability to appropriately progress throughout the training plan. If you miss those. If you were to get rid of A sessions, for example, those would be the ones that would start to set you back pretty significantly as you go throughout the plan. Whereas the C sessions, if you get rid of those, you obviously are going to be missing out on whatever little bit of kind of fitness those are going to give you, because all of these sessions work together throughout the plan. But it's not going to be nearly as dramatic as if you were to just stop doing like all of your long runs or all of your hard runs. So the C sessions are the ones to modify or move or get rid of first. And then the B sessions. Think of the strength training as an A session unless it's the only B session that remains for a given week. So if you just have, let's say you're sick and you were sick for 3 days and you had to miss 3 days and you wanted to move around the rest of your week to get things in, drop the C sessions, drop the B session, and then you'll see there's a couple A runs, and then the strength training are B sessions. Get rid of or remove those last, even after you've removed some of the other run sessions, just because strength training is so important. And you can kind of use this structure throughout the training plan as needed. If you, let's say based on your work schedule, if you have to have certain days off, then you can move these sessions around on your own, and you can get rid of certain C sessions each week as needed. So this allows you some level of flexibility and customization. The way that I have the training week laid out is the optimal, perfect world scenario. If someone following this plan had nothing else going on in their life, this is the ideal way and order in which to do it. It doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. It just means this is the way that I imagined it being laid out and accomplished in this order. But obviously most of us have jobs, we have family obligations, we have other things going on in our life that we need to take care of and do. And so the A, B, and C structure kind of helps you work your training into the rest of your life. So especially if you're really busy, this A, B, and C structure can be really useful for you. So hopefully that kind of helps as you go throughout the plan and gives you a feeling of freedom, so to speak, in terms of knowing that you have the flexibility to move things around as needed. And you'll see that kind of structure is going to continue throughout the rest of the plan. Every now and then I'll throw in some of these little note cards here that introduce certain topics or when you're entering a certain phase in the plan. And then it'll eventually culminate with the actual event that you signed up for and are building towards in the training plan. So that kind of gives you a high-level overview of the training plan. And if you ever have any questions on this, you can always feel free to reach out to me via email. My email is my website, so peakenduranceSolutions@outlook.com. You can also go to my website, which is www.peakenduranceSolutions.com, and there's ways of getting in touch with me there.